Well, let's start our program. Our title of the program today is Water Quality and Quantity, Challenges and Solutions. So everybody's wanting to know what's happening with the Metropolitan Sewer District. It's pretty exciting. So we have Marilyn Wall and Larry Falkin to speak to this. And Larry Falkin is on the screen there. He's hailing from Sacramento, California. Just a little bit about Marilyn. Marilyn is a long time active member of Miami Group. And she's one of Cincinnati Enquirer's Women of the Year. Great. And so Larry, I think a lot of you know Larry. He was a former director of Cincinnati's Office of Environmental and Sustainability and a former leader of the sustainability efforts at the Metropolitan Sewer District. So he's coming from California. Welcome, Larry. Can we hear you? Can you just say something so we know that we can hear you?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Jean. I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Larry. So maybe we'll begin with Marilyn.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming and joining us on the Zoom. I'm Marilyn Wall, and I've been working on the sewer district issues for a long time. So I'm going to give you a little background, some of the history on this, and also talk about kind of where we are right now and how we got here. So most of you know, and I think some of this many people already know, we have kind of an antiquated system. It's been needing an upgrade for a long time, and but it's been neglected by our leadership as for a very long time. But I want to make sure everybody knows what a combined sewer overflow is, or a sanitary sewer overflow. And most of you know, but that refers to both the structures where sewage mixed with rainwater overflows into waterways from our sewer pipes, most of which are combined, that is sanitary and stormwater and industrial waste as well. So wanted to put up this map just to also give you just kind of a feel for, if you can see all the yellow dots. This was from last Thursday, and these were within 72 hours of when there had been a big rain. And the yellow dots show all the sewer overflows that were overflowing in that rainstorm. And there's one it's a red one over here that was still overflowing the following day. So this kind of gives you a feel for the extent of the problem that we're facing here, because it's been neglected for so long. And so one of the big reasons, one of the biggest things to talk about is, why do we care about sewer overflows? It's because of pathogens, viruses, and other diseases and problems that you can get from a health perspective from exposure to sewage. It's also an ecological issue. All the nutrients, sewage is actually partly fertilizer, and all the nutrients that go into our waterways, particularly Ohio, continue on down to Mississippi and to the Gulf of Mexico and contribute to the zone of hypoxia, which is the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. So, and it's also agricultural runoff as well, but we're all part of that because we discharge a lot of untreated sewage here in Hamilton County. So I want to talk real briefly about just what some of the issues are. So one of the biggest problems in getting this solved has been the governance structure of the sewer district. And I think if you get two governments involved, you got a big problem. They work together to solve it, but this shared responsibility has meant that a lack of clarity in who's responsible, what the roles are, who should do what, and it's led to endless arguments about what's the best process, what's the best project, where the biggest need is, how much money you should spend, and so on. So it's been one of the biggest problems, and it's also been one of the areas where the two defendants, the city and the county, have been litigating each other pretty much since 2013 over different aspects of the consent decree, but primarily their relationship with each other as to who's in charge. And to some extent, the federal court has actually defined some of that, but some of it not. And some of it is just still remains difficult. So, for instance, if the county is supposed to submit, phase 2 plan for where we are with the consent decree, but they're not supposed to micromanage the MSD. So it becomes hard for them to budget and decide what to do if you really don't know or understand the projects that you're looking at and can evaluate, is this the best or is that? Because we're talking about, not just millions of dollars, but billions of dollars. So it's led to a lot of costs, attorney costs. It's been a few years actually since I did a few information requests to find out how much litigation they cost. And they were at least over $5 million at that time between the city and county, fighting the EPA, fighting each other, and fighting us, frankly. Because we're trying to get it cleaned up, not be arguing about all the different aspects. And of course, the longer it goes, the more projects cost, the more expensive projects become. It's not just inflation, but costs go up. There's been a lot of projects reworked, disputes over modeling, and we've raised questions about models and whether or not they were accurate. And MSD has actually kind of modeled away about 3 billion gallons of sewage from what they first thought they had back in about 2004. So it has taken years to get to where we are. And even before that, there were organizations like Citizen Action who did a door-to-door campaign, getting signatures, getting people to sign petitions saying, we want you to spend a little more money and start fixing this problem. But, it was one of the commissioners at the time said, if I had more money, I would build more sewers in Western Hamilton County, which is really a subsidy to developers who want to, develop undeveloped areas instead of fixing the problems that we already had. So it's always been difficult to get politicians to want to raise taxes, and that's part of what the underlying problem is. There are other issues between the city and the county because pensions and ownership issues and so on. But what we had learned in the early 1990s, and this has been going on a long time, was US EPA had been negotiating with the city, the county, and the MSD for 7 years over establishing a consent decree to get the work done. And they still didn't have a consent decree. And that's when Sierra Club decided that we should file a notice of intent to sue. And that's how, we were realizing we weren't getting anywhere, but we needed more pressure on the defendants to get further down the road. I don't know if people are familiar with what citizen suits are, but you, as a citizen or a resident of the US, can file a notice letter, kind of get the polluter to the table to discuss what are they going to do. You don't have to file a suit, but if they're willing to talk and figure out what to do, you don't have to have a suit. But they didn't want to do that, and these work only if the city, if your federal or state agencies aren't doing the job, getting the job done. And so, and what happened was on the 59th day, the city and county filed a complaint and a consent decree, what they called an interim partial consent decree, which the judge eventually said was an illusion. It really didn't solve the problem or address what needed to be done. And he ordered them to, within a certain number of days, to file a full decree to deal with all the problems. So one of the biggest things that they had to do then was to do one thing that they should have done already, which was create a long-term control plan, which MSD is renamed to the Wet Weather Improvement Plan, or the WIP, they call it. So, while all that was going on, we did a lot of work to publicize the fact that people were getting sewage in their basements because of the pipes being overwhelmed, being under capacity, and sewage just backing up into basements in homes and businesses, and how unhealthy that is. People often don't realize at first that, it's not just water, it's sewage that's coming up through the drains. And if it's not properly cleaned up, it causes, health problems, as well as being damaging to your property, because things like mold will grow if you don't get rid of all the contaminated material and so on. But getting the sewage and basement program established so that this MSD is responsible to prevent future backups, to clean up after events like that, and to also pay claims for damages was a major step forward. It was the first time a consent decree was issued that actually included requirements to prevent these incidents and also compensate people for damages. And I think they've paid out about $37 million in claims so far. So you think of the impact to a lot of communities that have, who's got that kind of money laying around, having repeatedly clean every basement and having, your furnace damaged, your electricals damaged, and so on. So that was a major push then to get MSD to start cleaning things up. They've still got a lot to do. And we worked as part of trying to develop this long-term control plan, or wet weather plan. And so once we got a hold of it, there were about 400 projects on it, big and small. And we continued to work on trying to improve that plan, primarily in the area of what people call green versus gray. That is, everything the sewer district wanted and put in the plan was concrete, steel, upgrading pipes, making bigger pipes, bigger treatment plants. And one of the things we wanted was green infrastructure. And so Larry and I will talk more about that. And one of the projects that a couple of Sierra Club interns worked on with us to do a field work on what was going on in Lick Run along Queen City, and where, because there were so many vacant properties, condemned, abandoned properties, that could we in fact daylight the stream that used to run there called Lick Run and have the water on the surface acting like a normal stream, and out of the sewer pipe that was causing about 1 billion gallons a year of overflow a typical year. So MSD did adopt the concept after quite a while, and began working on that. They didn't fully daylight the stream. It's kind of a mini stream now. They put another storm pipe underneath the little creek that you see on the surface, but it did remove a lot of stormwater from the combined system, and that really helped clean up the water a great deal. And so all of that was part of phase one that was about 10 years long. It took about an extra 4 years to get from negotiating over the wet weather plan that MSD produced, developing it and negotiating with EPA before that got started. But we've gotten through phase one, which cost about $1.5 billion. And it's hard to tell exactly how much overflow we've gotten rid of. We know Lower Mill Creek was over 2 billion gallons, but the rest of it, it's hard to tell exactly how much has been removed from the overall total amount of sewer overflows. And that brought us up to phase two. Now, MSD was supposed to do the planning and design work for phase two while they were doing phase one and be ready to roll when phase two was to be started. And they weren't ready. The city and county were continuing to sue each other and litigate that. They got EPA to give them another year to come up with their phase two plan. And then they both submitted plans instead of a plan. And so the US EPA forced them to do the next list of projects they had. Well, then the judge finally ruled and said that the EPA should use the county's plan as the phase two plan. And that's launched into rounds of negotiations, which, depending on how you want to count that, about 5 to 6 years we've been waiting to try to get a phase two plan. So the EPA has been pretty frustrated, I think, and pretty annoyed with the delay and of the waste of their time trying to get through this whole process. And at the end of August, they approved a phase 2A plan. It has 5 projects in it. That is so pathetic. But it also includes the fact that by the middle of next year, June, they have to submit a phase 2B plan. Which hopefully then goes back to triggering some of the things in the consent decree, where the US EPA has a chance to review the plan, approve it or not approve it, say what's wrong with it, and require, MSD to, or it would be the county then to update the plan and, then dispute their resolution. So it's sort of gotten us back into the process that we needed to use consent decree tools to move forward. But over the next 9 months, actually it's less than that now, I guess, to come up with a good phase 2 plan. So I want to just mention quickly what's in the phase 2 plan. That 2A is 5 projects, like I mentioned. One's a diversion chamber at Mill Creek, which is to direct flow from the auxiliaries. I don't know if they've actually ever used it yet, but I think it is actually completed. It's planning and design for a massive pump station to pump more overflow volume to this treatment plant. And there's also a power upgrade for Little Miami treatment plant. And they're going to do construction for CSOs 402 to 406. That's actually really important because those overflows are all along the Ohio River and Muddy Creek area on the west side. And sorry,
Can you show us where?
well, they're up in this area. up here.
Okay.
Yeah, so when they're called high water, dry weather overflows. That is, it's not raining here, but it rained upstream. Pittsburgh, Southern River Valley, Muskegon River Valley, water level in the Ohio River's up, and the water from the Ohio River goes right into those storm overflows and into the treatment plant at Muddy Creek, making it impossible to actually effectively treat Muddy Creek sewage that's coming in, right? So it ends up with a lot of bypasses and overflows to Muddy Creek and to the Ohio River. So it is important that they're fixing those, but overall, the plans they've even got for this stage 2A are not going to make a big difference other than that in reducing the storm overflow. So the big challenge for us now, I think, is to make sure we can get as much green infrastructure into the stage 2B plan as we can. I think everything you look at from EPA to many organizations that have done green infrastructure projects, the cost of doing that is normally less than the cost of building bigger and bigger treatment plants. You gotta remember, they're only going to operate when you have big storms, and they're only going to operate for short periods of time. They're not really useful much of the time. And they're really expensive. I'm going to try to fast forward through this here because I'm watching the clock and I see that my time is running out quickly. And so the Mill Creek plant, what they're proposing is about a $400 million project to upgrade the plant, build a high rate treatment plant, and build a bigger pump station. About $400 million for that. They want to spend about 173 at Muddy Creek, but it really doesn't, neither of these get very much overflow out of the whole system from what they had initially proposed. And at Little Miami, they might get a lot more out. It's pretty expensive though, $389 million, but just between those three, they're going to be spending close to $1 billion. And there are other big dollar projects that they've got in the books, like at Little Miami, but there's a proposal for an aerobic digester. And there are other major things because, for instance, in the Muddy Creek, there's an interceptor that needs to be built to get sewage from one end of that sewer shed to the other. So, and all that will take a lot of time, 10 years, and the overall totals of these projects, those three big dollar projects are not going to remove that much overflow from the whole process. We're still going to have billions of gallons of overflow unless they're able to pull a heck of a lot more water out of the pump stations, which doesn't seem particularly feasible. So it's still going to be a pretty major problem, and that's part of why we think that we really need to get stormwater out of the system rather than building bigger and bigger pipes, bigger and bigger treatment plants. Because particularly with climate change and bigger storms, higher intensity, huger volume of rain, we're going to have a bigger volume of overflows. And it's a global issue in the sense of needing clean water. You know, there are so many places now that are suffering so much from drought, even in the US. And the notion that we just let our water be dirty, and then we just want to flush it down the Ohio River as fast as possible, when we ought to be reusing it, storing it, potentially getting additional energy use out of storing water, rainwater that we get. And the energy cost of doing wastewater treatment is very high. I think Larry can speak some more of that when he did a sustainability report when he worked for MSD. It is enormously expensive to treat stormwater and sewage that have been mixed together and never needed to be in the first place. So, and there are, you know, a number of other areas where we're working on trying to get stormwater out, like for instance, with the Brent Fence Bridge, and trying to get them to separate more, you know, sewers. Because on most of our roads and highways, the stormwater goes to the nearest combined sewer, just making the problem worse and worse. And we, you know, have to resurface and so on, and open up streets for, you know, Wi-Fi connections and, you know, fiber optic cable. We want to be able to put some storm sewers in and get these things separated as we go through things. So I'm going to turn it over to Larry because we did go past my time, and we'll give you questions at the end. So I'm sorry I sound really rushed. There's a lot of material here that, so I'm going to hand it over to you, Larry. Are you ready? Then we'll do questions at the end. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, Marilyn, and thank you to the people who helped set up the program today, to Jeannie and to Barry for running sound, and happy to be back here with the Sierra Club. Let's see, something just changed my view. Let me get this there. Um, so I had a couple of topics that I wanted to address with you all. I'll start by saying that I pretty much agree with everything that Marilyn said, and I'm going to try to cover some slightly different areas. The four main things that I want to talk about, one is the ongoing and intensifying flood damage that Cincinnati suffers every year. So in addition to the combined sewer overflows, the fact that multiple properties get damaged in Cincinnati every year is, to me, one of the major stormwater topics that needs to be addressed. One of the things that, to me, is a major contributor to that problem is the lack of financial incentives for landowners to address stormwater on their own property. And I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm very concerned about how responsibility for stormwater is fragmented among multiple agencies so that we don't get to have any kind of unified or organized approach to stormwater. And finally, I'm going to talk about some technologies that are unused or underused in our area that could be very helpful in addressing some of the stormwater problems that we're facing. So with that as an outline of where I'm going to be going, the first thing I wanted to focus on is how much flood damage is actually happening every year in Cincinnati, because I think most people don't realize. MSD's database shows approximately 4,000 to 5,000 properties being damaged by flooding in Cincinnati in an average year. Sometimes more, sometimes less, it fluctuates, but 4,000 to 5,000 structures are damaged every year in Cincinnati from stormwater. That's a lot. And of those, about 20%, maybe a little less than 20%, are damaged by sewer backups. And the other 80% are from overland flow of water or from excessive water problems that originate on the property where the flooding occurs. Now, that 2080 statistic is from MSD, and so it may not be exactly right. They have a motive to say it's not the sewers. But really, they do a lot of investigation of every one of these flood incidents, and it's safe to say that a significant majority of it is not the sewers, but it's still structures being damaged by stormwater every year. Coupled with that is when you look at the climate data, Cincinnati's storms are intensifying. They're intensifying about 1% per year. So over the last 20 years, we're getting 20% more extreme storms every year. And the extreme storms that we're getting deliver more rainfall with each storm. So that is an ongoing trend towards worse and worse flood damage problems. And then the final piece of the problem, in my view, is that Cincinnati is really overdue for a really, really big storm. The biggest storm that Cincinnati has ever gotten in its history is 5.4 inches of rain in 24 hours. And you look at other communities around us, and it's not uncommon to see in our part of the country communities that have gotten 7 inches, 8 inches, even 15 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. we have no idea what 8 inches of rain in a 24-hour period in Cincinnati would look like. And that's the kind of thing, as our storms intensify, that we really should be preparing for because we're overdue for it. So, understanding that flooding problem, what do we do about it, and what might potential solutions look like? The first thing I would say is that as much as possible, we want to handle rain where it falls. We want the landowner to be able to handle as much of the rain that falls on their property as possible. Unfortunately, right now, we give them absolutely no incentive to do that. Metropolitan Sewer District's annual budget is driven primarily by stormwater. Think about it, on a dry day, the Mill Creek treatment plant gets about 60 million gallons of sewage. On a rainy day, they get about 300 million gallons of mixed sewage and rainwater, 5 times as much as on a dry day, which means every pipe, every tank, every valve in that sewage treatment plant is 5 times larger than it would have to be if you were just treating sewage so that you can treat sewage and stormwater. Stormwater is really what drives MSD's budget. And yet MSD's customers are billed based on how much potable water they use. You pay nothing for the stormwater that leaves your property. That's not a big deal for residential properties. Residential properties are usually not very big and don't generate a whole lot of stormwater. But when you think about commercial properties, especially commercial properties with large parking lots, those parking lots are paying absolutely nothing for the huge volume of stormwater that is leaving those properties. If MSD had an impervious surface fee or something like that, part of the bill that's based on how much sewage you generate, and a part of the bill that's based on how much stormwater you generate, then landowners would have a financial incentive to hold the water on the property, prevent it from running off. And some of the most effective solutions are the on-site solutions that right now landowners have absolutely no reason to implement because they're not being incentivized to do it. MSD, in part relating from the some of the work that the Sierra Club did, was moving towards an impervious surface fee, had announced an intention to do an impervious surface fee, and that effort seems to have lost momentum. And so getting that re-energized would be a really important thing to do. Next thing I would touch on is the way that responsibility for stormwater is fragmented. When we talk about stormwater, talk a lot about MSD. MSD is only responsible for the stormwater when it enters a combined sewer. If you're in a separate sewer area, if you're draining over land, we have the Stormwater Management Utility, SMU, we have the County Conservancy District, we have watershed conservancy organizations, we have building departments issuing land development permits in all of the municipalities. We have literally dozens of entities with shared responsibility for stormwater and nobody that will claim ownership. So the stormwater team really needs a quarterback, needs somebody who is in charge of calling the plays and making sure that everybody in that space is playing as a team. Right now, it's totally fragmented and disorganized. So, as a region, one of the things that would be a high priority is figuring out how to assign lead responsibility for stormwater and coordinate the efforts of all the people, all the organizations that have pieces of the responsibility. And then the next topic that I wanted to talk about is some unutilized and underutilized technologies. One of the things that I'm very excited about as a potential is infiltration wells. If you think about the way we handle stormwater now, we mostly pipe it sideways. We pipe it to the nearest sewer inlet or to the nearest stream or river, but we mostly take water sideways. If we think about how nature dealt with rainwater, they mostly took it vertical. It would infiltrate into the ground, it would soak down to the aquifer, and the aquifer is nature's plumbing, and gradually over decades, water would find its way horizontally to the rivers and streams. So if we want to replicate nature's patterns, what we need to do is help the water move vertically. An infiltration well is simply a hole drilled down to an aquifer that can receive the water. You only want to do it with stormwater, not water that's mixed with pollutants. And this is a very, very common thing to do. There are thousands of these infiltration wells in existence in the state of Ohio. There are hundreds of them in existence in Hamilton County, but neither MSD or the Stormwater Management Utility uses them at all. So if we want to take the pressure off of our existing sewers, it's really expensive to make the pipes bigger and make the treatment plants bigger than taking the water vertical to an aquifer instead of horizontal to another pipe would be a better way to do it. The other technology that I'm excited about but is being underutilized is real-time controls. And when we talk about real-time controls, MSD is a national leader in smart sewers. And by smart sewers, we mean throughout their system, there are hundreds of places where they have flow meters and water level gauges to tell them what's full, what's at capacity, what's not at capacity in every moment in time. And they have sophisticated models to predict, based on the rainfall that's happening in real time, where they have excess capacity in their system, where they don't have enough capacity in their system, they're going to have flooding and overflows. And in real time, they have hundreds of valves throughout the system that they can open and close and adjust to maximize storage in the system in places where they have some spare storage in a part of town where maybe it's not raining very hard, so they can keep that water and save space in the pipes for the part of town where it's raining really hard. So that's what we mean by real-time controls, having all those smart sensors and remote controlled valves to be able to adjust in real time. Now, in our community, we have literally hundreds of retention basins and detention basins that landowners have been required to put on their property when they develop their property. Each of those basins basically just has an outlet pipe. And so if there's water in the basin, it is discharging. That's not necessarily when we want it to be discharging. Maybe it has capacity to hold that water and it's flooding downstream. So if we could go and hook each of those detention basins into MSD's smart sewer system, put a real-time control valve on the outlet of each of those existing basins, we could store a lot of water in basins that already exist and take the peaks off of storm discharges by holding water where we have spare capacity and letting it out of those basins when those basins are getting full and they need to be emptied. So real-time controls have a lot of potential. MSD is using it within their own assets, but they're not using it in privately owned assets. And that would be the next place that we could really go with it. So, conclusion, I would say that there are a lot of things that could be done in Cincinnati to do a better job of managing stormwater, and we really need to get serious about it because the storms are getting more and more intense. It would be very helpful if our policymakers at municipal level and county level were hearing from constituents, that we need them to get serious about stormwater. So that's it for my remarks, and let me turn it back to Jeannie so we can have some questions and discussions.
Great. We have some questions here. Here it is.
Was active in Sycamore Township zoning for a while and trying to kind of monitor what it was doing. One of the things that I noticed was missing. There was no interest in making less runoff in any development. They would put ponds in, but there was no interest in actually doing policy. And they were saying that Hamilton County was revising its zoning rules. I heard that and I never got anything back from them because Sycamore Township, where I live, so we'll do whatever Hamilton County zoning proposals are. And I never heard anything about it. And I think that's where there could be a big difference. So maybe you'd like to answer that or a comment on it.
Yeah, you have an answer, Larry, to that question, or Marilyn?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. When we talk about having a coordinated effort among policymakers, the idea that, you know, Sycamore Township or every municipality is making zoning decisions, land development decisions that impact stormwater and stormwater runoff. And those efforts are not being coordinated in any way. And then all that water runs off into the MSD system. And then, you know, when I was with MSD, I would have said, you know, MSD gets blamed for a lot of bad decisions that happen in some other places. That's part of the story, and part of the story is MSD deserves its own share of the blame. But until we get the team playing as a team, we do have one entity dumping their problems on the next entity.
Thank you. I have a quick question, Larry, just quickly, and then maybe Marilyn has an answer too. I just wanted to know about the costs of these technologies that you're talking about. Is it exorbitant? Is it something that's been proposed already to the city or the county? Where does that sit?
The real-time controls are very inexpensive, especially because MSD has already done the hydraulic modeling and the creation of the network the real-time controls would have to tie into. When MSD implemented their smart sewer system, they were able to reduce combined sewer overflows by about 800 million gallons at a cost that was a fraction of traditional stormwater control methods. So yeah, using the existing basins is much cheaper than building new basins. In terms of infiltration wells, honestly, we do not have enough local experience to know. What we need to do is start using them. We know that in a variety of places, they're being used all the time. The private sector is using them a lot. So they can't be cost prohibitive, but until we really get into the business of using them, it's a little bit hard to cost them out. It's basically the cost of drilling a well. And so, you know, well drilling technology is well proven.
Thank you. Ralph.
Give Marilyn.
Oh, look, Marilyn, I don't know, I was waiting for about you. Okay, yeah, if you don't mind getting up, because the microphone isn't a very long cord.
So I have a general question. This group, some of the members of the Sierra Club were involved in providing comments on the Green Cincinnati plan. And my understanding is there's provisions in there primarily to plant more tree canopy for the purpose of absorbing some of the run. I mean, it'll help the problem. It's not one solution, but if you had multiple solutions, for example, the two that you mentioned, and expanding the tree canopy might help. Plus, there's another provision that the city is proposing is to use the biochar, the material that you can put down and plant with the trees that augments the ability to absorb carbon and also water. So what do you two think about that aspect of, not as the only solution, but often we don't look at the pieces, if we put them together, we'll have a better solution rather than just looking at a piece. So what about this, the technology piece and the nature-based piece together as a solution?
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. This is something where it's multiple pieces of the solution, not one size fits all solution. Tree canopy is hugely important. Cincinnati, with a 41% tree canopy, is among the national leaders in tree canopy in cities. Our park board does a great job of planting and maintaining trees. Not that we can't do better. We've got a dedicated revenue stream for tree planting. The park board in their forestry division is working on the biochar solution that you talked about. It's a great way to add porosity to soil so that the soil holds more water. So yes, absolutely, planting trees and adding biochar to soil are two very good pieces of the solution.
Okay, thank you. I want to change the subject. I have one additional question. They have been promoting this bill to sell the railroad. It's supposed to provide all this revenue for infrastructure. I know it has to pass, but do you think that money could be used as a problem, or not? Is that part of that revenue flow that potentially will be here? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Oh,
I've heard it mentioned by a couple politicians that are trying to use it in some way, but I don't know that it's what you would call solid, it's a sure idea that.
I think it's an issue isn't it on the ballot?
It's on the ballot, but I don't know how that's included in how the money will get spent,
But that might be relevant to this
Yeah.
group, which is basically lobbying. But if that is relevant, we might want to lobby for that particular bill.
yeah, well, especially the green infrastructure aspects.
Oh, yeah.
So, yes.
I just want to comment that the ad on TV with AppTab doesn't mention that in what they would spend it on.
Meantime, I believe the county is going to reinvigorate the impervious surface fee. People are trying to get a couple meetings before the end of the year, so there's some movement to move forward on that.
I was very confused about the consent decree. I thought that was a request to separate the combined sewer overflows. Is it just making bigger pipes? It seems counterproductive that way.
Yeah, separation is a solution, depending on where you are. You see that it's pretty expensive, but there are a lot of different solutions that are parts of this, and they all can be in the consent decree. The consent decree has this whole adaptive management process where MSD can say, you can do it better. If we do this green infrastructure project or smart sewers or whatever, then if we build a bigger pipe. And the need toward, the green rather than the bigger pipes, because I think in some ways it would be pretty impossible to put a big enough pipe. And it takes a lot of energy to pump that water, miles, to treat it at a treatment plant and then discharge it in the Ohio where, it doesn't do much good locally. So. Back to you.
Other questions?
Yes.
Eric?
You're gonna turn that over, be careful, you're gonna disconnect yourself.
So Pam has indicated that there's an app called Climate Action Now. And that if an email can be written and the emails to the people who should get the email, this app can set it up and basically send it out to the appropriate people. So I think she's asking Larry if that's a potential tool to influence these people.
Did you hear that, Larry?
I did, yes. I am not familiar with the Climate Action Now app, but there are a number of organizations have technologies that make it easier for citizens to communicate with their electeds. And so I don't have an opinion about which conduit we use, but yes, if people want to weigh in with their elected representatives on prioritizing stormwater management, that would be a really useful thing, because to get all the agencies singing off the same sheet music, they're going to need the motivation from our policymakers.
Question from Bob.
So we've been looking at some maps of the sewer system. And if you look between I-75 and I-71 north of the Ohio River, there's virtually no stormwater that falls in that area that makes it to a public waterway. And MSD has had, ever since the consent decree, to start to do that, and they haven't done. In fact, there's little stormwater networks in that area that collect stormwater, and they end up in a combined sewer. So they don't want to do it. And if you ask MSD, they will say stormwater is not their mandate. They are not required to control stormwater. So if we get a new quarterback that gets all the regional entities together, we're still stuck with an MSD that doesn't want to fix the problem. That's a big problem politically.
Have a comment on that, Larry?
Yeah. I think there's a lot to be said about that. But there's two sides of the discussion to some extent. And that is, if you look at the older areas of the city, any area of the city built before about 1950, it was built with combined sewers. The state of the art at the time was, all water goes into the same pipe, because before about 1950, it wasn't going to a treatment plant, it was just going to the river. Treatment plants are relatively new in the history of civilization. And so to try to separate combined sewer system is really, really complicated. You think about just within your own home, you've got roof drains and you've got sumps in the basement, but you've also got toilets and showers and kitchens, and the amount to which it's interwoven, there are literally hundreds of thousands of cross connection points. And there are places where you can separate out a significant amount of stormwater that's not mixed with sewage. And there's places where it's just totally impractical to separate it. And so with MSD's mission to keep all the combined sewer overflows out of surface water, even for them, it's not going to be one solution. There's places where you can do separation. There's places where you just have to deal with the mix. But within that, I'd say MSD has a bias towards engineering solutions, not natural solutions. They are an organization of engineers, and what they are good at is designing and building pipes. And Lick Run was a great illustration for how bigger pipes are often not the best solution. Lick Run diverted a lot more water for a lot less money, even though the separation was messy and hard. Making bigger pipes would have been even harder. And so my opinion is MSD doesn't do enough separation and doesn't do enough green technology. But there's no way to do away with the gray technology. We need some of that also.
Yes, is there a way that Sierra Club can use its might to convince them that green infrastructure is also a big solution as we move into the future? I mean, can we do something to push that? Yeah.
Hi, Larry, and I've got a question for both of you. MSD, with all its faults, is the only agency that works in the entire county. We just heard from Sycamore Township, we've got 46 communities I used to be a supervisor on soil and water, and we can only act in areas that are not incorporated. We have, I don't know what, 35 incorporated cities that all have their own MS4s for stormwater. And the point is that until we get unit government, we blame it all on MSD because it is the only group that works county-wide in the county of Hamilton County.
Got a response to that?
So MSD's
Building their.
MSD's answer to that would be that they are only by law authorized to do what they're authorized to do when they're authorized to deal with sewage. And so if there's no sewage in the pipe, they will say that they do not have the legal authority they need to address a pipe that has no sewage in it.
But they also own a lot of storm pipes. No, it's historically bizarre, but anyway.
You know, Kentucky SD1 owns all of the storm pipes and all the sewer pipes and all the land they go under and has responsibility for the riparian zone on every stream. They're an advanced suite, 3 counties working together. We have 1 county and can't work alone.
Right.
And our county could change the law. Imagine that.
Okay,
So,
I just have
Dr.
a
Miller,
couple
I
of-
appreciate you. I'm sorry, Dr. Miller, I appreciate you bringing us an example of how it might be done better.
Okay, I just had a couple of ideas. You know, separating these storm and sanitary pipes, it does sound complicated, but when you think about it, this whole lead pipe program, that's pretty complicated, and yet, you know, municipalities, Cincinnati is now taking that on to get rid of the lead pipes. We just happened to win the lottery at our house, and the city is going to replace the lead pipe into our house, so it can be done. It's just a matter of figuring it out. And then the other thing I thought of, trying to promote the rain barrel over here, only $20 a ticket. Rain barrels and things like pervious patios or driveways. Going back to the old fashioned 2-strip driveways where there's grass in the middle, so there's more pervious surface, and even cisterns. I mean, I heard somebody told me that when the city put in sewer systems, they made people promise to not use their cisterns, but cisterns were a way to divert water. So maybe we need to go back to some more old-fashioned ideas, all of us, and then work on the big parking lots as well.
Larry, you mentioned incentives. And does it take financial incentives to get people to hold on to water, or can we use education some way, or having the city set by example? For example, there's a lot of water coming off the freeways, that's the impervious surface, and many cities have grassy swales all along the river that collects water. Just, it's a simple thing, it's a beautiful thing. It gives, you know, it's diversity, it's a good species, it's a habitat. It sort of solves a lot of problems, and it's not that expensive. But if we did something like that, that would give residents maybe an example of how they can hold on to water, because this seems like it's going to work into a crisis at some point.
I think that leading by example gets you a certain distance of the way, but if we really want all of our commercial landowners to do it, it has to be the smart business decision. And if they're paying for every gallon of water that leaves their property, their business sense will drive them to control that water where it falls.
Other questions? Bob.
Another comment. There are other cities and counties that have the same problem, and somehow they come up with a memorandum of understanding that spells out what they're going to do, and they do it, and they have incentive programs. They're doing all this, and they're fixing it. We're just backward.
You agree? We're back.
Yes.
I agree, there is a solution. We just need the will to do it.
Ruth?
I'm wondering if you have a template for a letter to the editor or a, what do you call those bigger comments you send to the Enquirer? Or the newspaper, op-ed, that would start to educate people, because again, once people get educated in whatever way. I couldn't write a letter like that, because I'm just learning now. And I'm glad I'm here. But has that been done in other places where, yeah, and again, I think we're doing the best that we can. However, I think we all want to do better. And we have a city council that seems interested in bringing this in.
Marilyn, Jean, does the Sierra Club have recommended language for people who want to communicate with their electeds?
I think we could probably come up with something. Do you think so, Marilyn?
Yeah.
That might be a good project for us. More questions? I think we're running out of questions.
Okay,
Mike's got a question.
What's that?
Miller.
Oh my.
I've got a comment. You are probably not aware that, so much of what's done for the environment in Cincinnati isn't done by corporate Cincinnati, it's done by nonprofits. And it's just incredible, what we do. The Mill Creek Alliance, for example, has constructed 9 bankful wetlands in the upper Mill Creek Valley to dissipate floodwaters. And that was, we get the land, we prepare it, and we develop those spaces. We're taking out low head dams. We've taken out 12 low head dams, mitigated them on the Mill Creek. It's soon going to be have no dams at all for fish migration. The result is that the biota and the river are coming back. I just, we monitor water quality in 200 sites in Hamilton County monthly for 8 parameters. We've got 4 teams that are doing that in different rivers, the Little Miami, the Mill Creek, the upper and the lower Great Miami River. These are all nonprofits working towards improving water quality and getting action. And we all work behind the scenes. Nobody ever works confrontationally. We're working with the city, with MSD, with soil and water. It's a large movement, and I just want to emphasize that the only actor in this is not the city and the county. There are groups like yourselves that can take action, and certainly there are many that do. It takes a lot of effort, but we do it.
I think that's a wonderful suggestion. I think we need to collaborate more with these other groups. Mike. I think that since you're doing such good work, we can work with you and then have more effect, bring about some change, or maybe have some more impact. I mean, I think we're running out of questions. I think we're kind of bring this to a close, right? Do you have any final comments, Marilyn?
Any suggestions or ideas people have or want to get involved? That would be very nice.
So any suggestions on how to get involved? I mean, the Crow people are very interested in this. I mean, they're another group that we can work with. Citizens for the Rights of the Higher River Watershed.
Marilyn, how can people help with this effort?
With this effort, I think one of the big things would be getting involved. Well,
I think one of the big things we could do, we've done like postcard campaigns and we people send postcards, but I think possibly an online petition would be a good one to start right now. To try to get the city and county working together, and also getting green infrastructure approach.
And how would a person do that through Sierra Club? Would they contact you or?
Sure. I can help set something like that up.
Well, as many of you know, I'm the treasurer of the local group of Sierra Club. And one of the things that happened, and Marilyn can tell you about it, is that the attorney for this MSD work has retired. And now our group would like to pay for the additional attorneys with the same law firm to keep that work going. We've had an anonymous donor give a matching fund of $50,000 to keep that going if we can bring up matching funds with that. Now, all of this work is tax deductible. However, there's a special way that you have to do that, and that's make out a check to the Sierra Club Foundation and send it to me. I am not the foundation, but I can send it out to them to make sure it's in our account and can get back to work with that legal fund. So that is another way to help out, even if you don't want to go and dig a well in your backyard. So please keep that in mind with your RMDs at the end of the year, and those can go to tax deductible foundations. The Sierra Club Foundation is one of those. Though Sierra Club is not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. That's really good to know about that we do have some financial leverage perhaps that we can use to make an impact. So I think we're probably coming to the close of the end. If there's any more, no more questions. I think we're coming to an end, and I just want to thank Marilyn and Larry for presenting tonight. Thank you so much. Any other last final comments, Larry, that you might have before we say goodbye?
No, just thank you for giving me the opportunity to share, and you know, we got to do something. The rains are coming.
That's right. It's coming fast. Okay, thank you. Anything else, Marilyn? Goodbye. Okay, thank you and wish you a good night, and we will continue this conversation.